Before we start today's episode, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were still trying to find your voice or trying to understand parts of yourself you hadn't fully faced yet? Because that's honestly been a big part of this journey for me. Hey loves, and welcome back to Lynn's Place. Usually this is the space where I guide the conversation, share reflections, and talk about different parts of my journey. But today we're doing something a little different. Instead of me leading the conversation, my husband is joining me again. But this time he's turning the mic around and asking me the questions. He's been watching this podcast journey from the beginning. The writing, the recording, the moments where I question if I should even hit the publish button. So today, we're going to reflect on the journey so far. So babe, welcome back to Lynn's Place.
Thanks for having me back. Really glad to be here. But I'm going to just go ahead and get right to it. We're not going to waste no time. I'm going to ask one question that I'm sure everybody wants to know. What made you start Lynn's Place in the beginning?
Honestly, it started as a joke a long time ago, and I was like, as much stuff as I deal with on a daily basis, I really should just start a podcast. But then when I retired, I was like, wait, I should really start this podcast. So then it became something very personal for me. For a long time, I felt like there were parts of my voice that I kept quiet, parts of my story that I never really shared out loud. So starting Lynn's Place was a step toward healing my inner child, the part of me that spent years feeling misunderstood or unseen. It was about creating a space for people who feel unseen in their own lives. A lot of people carry things they don't talk about. And I wanted this podcast to be a place where people could slow down for a moment, reflect, and realize they're not alone with what they're experiencing.
So based on that, have you changed the way you see yourself since you started the podcast?
Yes, it really has. Every time I sit down and record, I'm not just talking to listeners, I'm also hearing myself in a new way. There have been moments where I surprise myself with what comes up while I'm recording. It's helped me see that my voice matters more than I realized, and it's helped me embrace parts of my story that I used to feel insecure about. This podcast really has been part of my healing journey.
So let me ask you this. What has been the most encouraging feedback you received so far?
One comment that really stayed with me came from my Aunt Darce, actually. She's a very number one top tier fan of mine. She said, "You are so brave. It's like you are speaking for me and a lot of women who just can't put the words together." And that honestly meant a lot. Because that's really the heart behind Lynn's Place. So many people feel things deeply but struggle to put those feelings into words. So if this podcast can help give language to experience people have been carrying quietly, then I feel like I'm doing exactly what it's meant to do.
So the journey during this podcast has been about healing, being a voice for women who feel like they haven't been heard. Is that fair to assess?
Yes.
Okay. So has there been a story about yourself that you felt nervous about sharing, but you felt like it needed to be said?
Yeah, definitely. When one of the episodes where I was talking about how unhealed I realized I was when we first got married, I was thinking I was still carrying a lot of things I hadn't really processed yet. In the beginning of our marriage, there were moments where I felt really lost. Not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't fully understand myself yet. So the ways I reacted, some of the ways I shut down emotionally came from wounds I hadn't dealt with yet. And honestly, that felt scary because I wondered that people would judge me. And honestly, there were moments where I felt like a horrible wife. But the truth is, a lot of people either enter a relationship still carrying things they haven't healed from. And part of the growth, part of the marriage, part of becoming a better partner is being willing to face those things and grow through them.
So looking back now, what helped you start healing and help you find yourself again?
Honestly, it started with being honest with myself. For a long time, it was easy to think the problem is outside of me, circumstances, stress, and other people. But healing really started when I began asking myself the deeper questions. Why I reacted in certain ways. Why did certain things trigger me? And what parts of my past were still affecting how I showed up in our marriage. I also learned that healing doesn't happen overnight. It's small parts of awareness, small changes in how you respond, and being willing to grow instead of staying stuck in old patterns. And through that process, I slowly started finding myself again.
Yeah, I remember that season. That was it was it was honestly good to witness because I saw the work that you put in for yourself. I saw the journey that you went on for you, and I just really thought that was, I thought that was a beautiful thing to witness. Now, the weight of a strong black woman.
Uh huh.
That was deep. That was. I'm not even gonna lie. That was deep. Like I still go back and play that sometimes myself just because of that. But now, what part of that message? Well, not so much what part of that message, but where did that message come from for you personally?
It came from real life. There's often an expectation placed on black women to always be strong, to hold everything together, to carry everyone else while never showing that they're tired. But strength without space to be human can become heavy. A lot of women grow up feeling like vulnerability isn't allowed. So that episode was to acknowledge that strength shouldn't mean suffering in silence.
So, what made you feel like it was time to speak up on it?
Honestly, it's because it really began to feel heavy for me. For the longest time, I was always the independent one, the one that everybody always came to for help. And then when it was time for me to say, hey, I need some help, I didn't have anybody to turn to. So it became heavy for me. So I felt like, not saying that I'm superwoman or anything, but it took a while for me to get to that point. And I know people that are older than me. I know people that have gone through worse things than me at my age. So I know if it was heavy for me, it's probably been heavier for them. So I felt like if nobody else would to speak on it, then why not do it myself?
So, I'm gonna ask you a follow up question, if that's okay.
Uh-huh.
What would your response be to someone who feels like, even with the understanding we have about the things that black women endure,
Mm-hmm.
what would your response be to someone who would say, just figure it out?
There's only so many times somebody can say, just figure it out. Because as reliable and will make a way mindset that all women, but majority black women, have, eventually you run out of options to figure it out yourself. It's not just that simple when there's a problem. Excuse the sniffles. It's allergy season. But it's something when it's a problem that's bigger than you. And it's bigger than your friend group. It's not just figuring it out. At that point, you need help. You need someone to talk to. Because if the weight gets too heavy, the same person that just told you to figure it out is going to be paying their respects. Because you're going to figure it out the wrong way.
Oh, that's deep. That's deep. I got one more question, then we'll move on.
Okay.
So, you know the phrase, behind every strong man is a strong woman.
Mm-hmm.
How much pressure does it, in your opinion, how much pressure does that put on a woman to live up to that statement?
I feel like that statement is backwards. I always have. Because if you're in a relationship or a marriage with the person that sees you as their equal, you're not standing behind them anyway.
What they be saying? Clock out? Ain't that what they be saying?
But there's pressures in that in general, because you don't know you should know what your partner has dealt with in their lifetime and how strong they are. So It's not a tit for tat. Oh, I have more battle scars than you. However, it's still weight because I might deal with something or have dealt with something that you can't comprehend, or you might have dealt with something that I can't comprehend. And we've had that conversation before with certain things that you've dealt with in your life that I have nothing to speak on because I've never gone through that or I haven't gone through that.
True, true.
So I don't think it's a pressure unless somebody makes it a pressure. I don't feel like it should be a competition when you're in a relationship or you're in a marriage with a person to be like, oh, well, I'm stronger than you because I dealt with that. Or if I'm this strong, you got to be that strong. Absolutely not. Because if anybody that knows us knows I'm a baby. I am a baby. I am all bark, no bite unless you absolutely push me. Because I know that behind this last name comes some weight. But it shouldn't have to be to where you feel it in your body that stress and that pressure of somebody else being strong is with you. It's not how life is supposed to be. We're supposed to make each other better, not worse.
I just want to go on record and say that I'm stronger than you because my baked macaroni and cheese is banging.
You know what? Whatever.
Okay, I just want. It's documented, so it's there. So when people listen to this, they'll know.
The only reason your baked macaroni and cheese is better than mine is because I don't know how to make it. I'll admit it. It's fine.
Hey, we're not dealing with formalities. We're just dealing with facts, and facts are facts. But But no. So let me ask you to give one bit of advice or a piece of advice before we move forward. What would you say? Because you touched on something when you were saying that when you're equal with your partner, you shouldn't be standing behind them, right? Basically, you're saying it's a side by side, it's like a union,
right?
And you said that there shouldn't be anything that you dealt with that your partner doesn't know about. So, what advice would you have for a couple, whether they're in a relationship or a marriage? What would your advice be to them if they are holding something that they've dealt with, but they don't know how to communicate it to their significant other that they've gone through that? Because if I'm not mistaken, the guest that you had for the Strong episode, there were some things that were unexpressed for whatever reason, right?
Excuse the dog, people. He's scared of his own shadow.
All right, so I was getting ready to tell everybody since the dog has calmed down, we can continue. But apparently, somebody is outside playing with a dust ball or something, and he's on high alert. So forgive our dog in the process. But before he scared the living crap out of me, I was asking you, what advice would you give to a couple, whether just in a relationship or marriage, about telling the other about something that they've dealt with in their past or something that they're dealing with that they're trying to heal from?
Honestly, people always say, oh, I was waiting for the right time, or I'm waiting for the right time. Baby, there's never gonna be a right time to tell somebody about some trauma that you done dealt with. Whether it's trauma from your parents, trauma from something happening to you, trauma from being bullied in school, it doesn't matter. There's never a right time. You just have to sit down and deal with the uncomfortable conversation. And for me to say deal with the uncomfortable conversation is, somebody give me a pat on my back. Because I never did the uncomfortable conversations until me and you got together.
You did not.
So just sit down and have the uncomfortable conversation. Because there's no time limit on when you start or end your healing. There's no time limit on when it's okay to let someone in, especially if it's your husband or your wife. At some point, you have to quit snapping at them because they did something that you don't like, but not giving them justification of why it happened. You triggered me. Well, how did that trigger you? I don't want to talk about it. That's not a real way of communication. You have to sit down and have the uncomfortable conversation like we about to do with this dog.
I'm not understanding what's wrong. I went outside. There's nothing there. I think he's just lonely. But speaking of lonely, that's the perfect way for me to segue into my next question.
Okay.
You talk about faith a lot throughout your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And we know, as well as the listeners know, that sometimes faith can have you on a lonely journey,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So, for you, since you do discuss faith a lot throughout this podcast, how has your relationship with God, having to use your faith for your healing process and everything like that, how has your relationship with God changed during this journey?
I think the biggest shift has been learning to invite God into my being and not just my doing. For a long time, I trusted God with the work I was doing, but through this podcast, I've been learning to trust Him with who I'm becoming. It's been less about performance and more about His presence. Just showing up honestly and trusting that God can use that. I feel like in certain aspects of my life, I always relied on what I know or what I've been taught or what I've learned. And I never really asked God, okay, I know this, but what do you say? And I can definitely see the difference in when things get difficult or I start to overthink a lot of things. I'm like, okay, but God said this. God told me this. He promised us this. And it's a different playing field and it's a different mindset of when you actually start to acknowledge God in your everyday versus just when you need Him.
How important for you is it to convey faith in your podcast?
Very, because in the world that we live in now and the society that we live in now, I used to hear a lot of people say, oh, when is the younger generation going to step up? The old folks of the church is tired, this, that, and the third. However, if you're not giving people the opportunity to show you how God works for them as our younger generations, as 35 and I could say up, not below, because, how do you expect for them to understand what the amount of faith that they had back in the day pertains to them now? You can say, oh, well, I seen God do this, but if you don't listen to what God has done for them, how do you know it's not the same thing? How do you know it's not the same miracle as back then that He's doing now? So I feel like it's very important for me to speak about my faith. So maybe that the older people that are listening to my podcast can be like, okay, maybe people in her age bracket know about the God that we grew up with. Maybe they were paying attention to the prayers and the things that we were saying when they were growing up. But if you don't ask or you don't listen or you don't pay attention, you're never going to know that.
So this platform is also an opportunity to get your voice out, to let the older ones know, basically, not only were we paying attention, but we took what you taught us and we're applying it in our own lives, and this is the result that we're getting from that.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm gonna pass the bucket around in a minute for the offering. I feel like it's necessary. All right, but moving forward, I don't want to take too much time. I want to get personal for a moment.
Okay.
You gonna do it?
Go ahead.
All right, I just want to make sure. What's something the people listening to you don't realize about you or might not know about you?
Oh, we're going there, huh?
I did it, y'all.
Something people might not realize about me is that before starting this podcast, I hated the sound of my own voice.
What you mean you don't like your voice?
Hated it. For a long time, I felt like my opinions weren't really that important. So the idea of me recording myself and putting my thoughts out into the world was intimidating. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Every episode, every time I pressed record, it felt like I was reclaiming a piece of my voice that I pushed down for so many years. And what I didn't expect was that this podcast would start healing parts of me that I didn't even realize still needed to be healed. It's not just about sharing my story, it's about learning to believe in that my voice matters. Because for the longest time when I was younger, I used to get picked on about how deep my voice was. So you imagine a 6th, 7th, 8th grader being bullied because my voice wasn't high pitched like all the other girls in the classroom.
I can imagine, kids are cruel around that age.
Very much so.
I used to be one of them cruel kids. We're not going to talk about the details of that.
Okay.
But, I used to be one of them cruel kids, so I know how it could be. But I think I speak on behalf of everybody when I say that we're glad that you allowed yourself to come to this point to open up this platform for this podcast, for several different reasons. It's going back to the feedback that you said you got, it's giving women an opportunity to express themselves when they may not know how. So going into that, what are some conversations that you hope to have people start in their own lives since you've been doing the podcast?
That basically goes back to you asking about having the uncomfortable conversation. I hope that it helps people to start the honest, uncomfortable conversations with themselves, with the people that they love, and even with God. A lot of healing begins when we finally start saying the things we've been holding inside for years.
Before I continue, I just want to say that this broadcast has been brought to you by our lovely dog who decided to make his debut today, Bishop Sierra Carmichael. Throughout this podcast, you might hear him barking. We had no control. We didn't know he wanted to be on the show too. Had we known, we would have scheduled a slot for him. Now that we've got that out of the way, final question.
Okay.
What do you hope people feel when they leave from Lynn's place?
I hope that they feel like they're not alone. I hope they feel like it's time to start healing their inner child. I hope they stop feeling like they need permission to be who they are or feel like they must hide parts of themselves. And more than anything, I hope they feel loved and safe knowing that they're not alone in this life.
That's deep. That's deep. And I believe that not only that, but so much more is being taken away from when they listen to your episodes on your podcast. I get to have my reflection moment.
Okay.
I'm going to talk to you like you talk to us. Hey, love. I've always wanted to do that, I'm not going to lie. But watching you do this podcast, the work that you've put in, the countless journeys, the guests, the question lineups rather, all of that, witnessing it, I've saw you grow into your voice. I've seen you become more confident in sharing your story. I've seen you become more confident in helping others share their story. And I just want you to know that I am proud of you for creating this space.
Aw, thanks, babe. I really appreciate that because in the beginning of all this, you already know, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to scrap the whole idea. Don't worry about it. I was just kidding. Psych.
She was scared, y'all. But I'm so glad she came out of that fear. I honestly think you're doing a wonderful job. And I really, in my heart, believe that this is something that was needed for this time. And as much as I hate to do this, I'm going to give you back full control of your mic because I believe my time here is done. Thank you all for having me. You've been a wonderful audience. Please don't forget to tip your waitress.
I deal with this on a daily basis, y'all. At some point, somebody need to come get him. Just for a little bit, because he's a little crazy, but I love him anyway. But thank you for turning the mic around and asking me all the questions. I appreciate it. I appreciate you. And you did a wonderful job.
Thank you, baby.
This podcast started as a small step of obedience. But week by week, it becomes something bigger than I imagined. Not just a place where I share my story, but a place where we remember that we are all still becoming. Thank you for spending time with me. This has been Lynn's Place.